Well, good morning everyone, and welcome to our assembly on this beautiful sunny morning as we share together. I hope you're good wherever you are. I hope you're having a good time. We send all our love from church to everyone in each of the classes, to your teachers and to your support staff, and I hope you have a good day. We're going to be looking at the subject of looking at the heart of things in a few moments' time. But as always, we begin with a little prayer. And if you have a candle in your classes, like we have done throughout this time, then ask an adult maybe to find it and maybe to help one of you light a candle as we then share together, and that light linking us all together in the love of Jesus as we share together today. So we share this little prayer together. If you'd like to join in these words with me. Lord Jesus, as we meet together today for worship, please be with us. Give us light, give us hope, give us joy, and help us to see the world through your eyes. Amen. Well, we're going to look at this subject of looking at the heart of things. What does that mean? Well, looking is something we do with our eyes, and looking at the heart, well, the heart is sort of over this part of your body, but that can't be surely what we're talking about, like a medical thing. We often use the phrase looking at the heart of things to mean looking beyond simply what we can see. So not just looking at the physical or the literal, but looking at something deeper, what's behind everything. We're going to look at some various characters today, and the first of these is a lady called Mary Magdalene. You may have heard of her in the stories of Jesus. She's one of the people that Jesus called to be one of his disciples and to follow him. But over the years, when I look into the history of the Bible and the story of Mary Magdalene, well, it's amazing how the Bible, and indeed the rest of the church for 2,000 years nearly, saw Mary Magdalene not in a very nice way. They saw Mary Magdalene as somebody who struggled with severe mental illness and other things. People go through times of mental health and mental illness. That's not so much of a problem, but they sort of put this label on her as being somebody who maybe couldn't be trusted, therefore. And people can do that even today. Because they struggle in one area of their life, people add all sorts of labels to them. Adults do this a lot, and children can do this, sadly, on a playground or whatever. They also said some other very unkind things, which we won't go into today, but I want you to get the impression that for many people, at the time of Mary and indeed afterwards, over the next 2,000 years, people had a very low understanding of Mary. They didn't value her very much. They thought of her as, at best, somebody who was alongside the other 12 male disciples. What's interesting, about, I suppose, 20 years ago now, two lady archaeologists actually found the place where Mary Magdalene came from. It's a place called Magdala, Mary from Magdala. What they found when they discovered her house was actually something very different about this lady. She wasn't poor Mary, who perhaps had been through so many struggles. She was actually somebody who was a very astute businesswoman who ran a fishing business because of where her house was based in the relation to the seashore on the edge of the Sea of Galilee. So she was very wealthy, she was very businesslike. In many people's eyes, in her community, she would have been within the top people of her community, a bit like thinking about the top people of our community who we might look up to, or adults look up to. But she did something which was totally unheard of. She's the first lady recorded in the whole of Israel, but also in much of the world, who left her business, left her home, and went to follow this travelling rabbi called Jesus. And it was so radical, so new, a bit like any person stepping out and doing something completely new, that other people didn't like it, so they sort of rubbished her really. And they carried on rubbishing her for 2,000 years. But what we know now from the archaeology and everything else is what an incredible lady she was, both in terms of what she did, but also then to leave it all behind to follow something which she believed to be even greater. Maybe it was this that Jesus saw in Mary. And what's interesting is, from a Christian point of view, when it comes to the story of Easter, when all the other disciples had run away, it was Mary who stood with Jesus' mother at the cross. It was Mary who went to the tomb on that first Easter morning when all the other disciples were hiding or had gone away. It was Mary who stayed there, and it was Mary who was the first person to see Jesus be raised to new life by God. Absolutely remarkable. So remarkable that many people again thought this couldn't possibly happen, because at that time in their culture the witness of a woman was not considered very high. In fact, it was considered very poorly. And yet the four Gospels are absolutely clear. It wasn't Peter, it wasn't John or any of the other disciples. It was Mary who first saw Jesus. Other people would have laughed, but they knew what they knew because of that personality and character of who Mary was and is. When we take all that forward, since that first archaeology discovery, of course, the whole church and the understanding of Mary is slowly turning around. They've even made a film about her, and what they've done is they've built a most amazing church alongside Mary's house. Very beautiful. And there's mosaics depicting Mary, and there's a wonderful entrance, and inside the church, even the altar is in the shape of one of Mary's fishing boats. But into it all, both at the time of Mary and over those 2,000 years, and now into her success, I believe Jesus saw the person of who Mary was and is. And that's the beautiful thing of looking at the heart of things. Whether outside somebody is being popular or not popular, whether they're particularly in favour on the playground or out of favour, whether they're having a good time or a tough time, whether things are going brilliantly for them or whether they're actually in a very difficult situation, Jesus sees into our hearts and looks at who we really are and holds true to that. And that's really wonderful. Really wonderful. Let's look at another story. Marcus Rashford. You may have heard of him. He's an amazing footballer, plays for Manchester United and for England. And of course, many people will see him as that, as the footballer. But at the beginning of lockdown and everything else, it became part of a great movement with Marcus Rashford to campaign for free school meals for children in school, and also to think about those who maybe need to rely on the food bank and other organisations. And he explained how he himself had a very tough upbringing, because his mum, although she loved him with so much love, but she didn't have very much money. It's not a bad thing not to have money. What was lovely was he was loved. And in that, he then campaigned for children everywhere in order to gain that wonderful same gift of food each day. How does God see Marcus Rashford? Does God see Marcus Rashford just as a footballer? If he's playing well and Manchester United are successful, then somehow God sees him better? No, I think God sees that heart of that little boy who was in a very difficult financial situation, He sees him as a teenager and as a superstar of a football field. He sees him as he cares and loads food for food banks and seeks to change the well-being of many children throughout our country. He sees into the heart of Marcus Rashford, and that's a wonderful thing. If we look at somebody else called Greta Thunberg, you may have heard of her. She does an awful lot to try and help save our environment. She's someone who will be out campaigning when there's just a few people. She'll also be somebody who is on the world stage. She was asked to speak at a big conference where all the world leaders were present. And whether she's in the small community or on the big stage, God can see into her heart, and he sees her compassion and her love for creation and for wanting to save and look after this beautiful planet, which is our home that God has given us. Now, there will be a time when maybe Greta Thunberg won't be so famous, or she'll be in the past. Does God love her any different when she's both a teenager and later hopefully a woman and then a person into her old age? No, he sees the same person, the same heart in each and every one of us. And he sees all our times where we try to help and care for one another and for the world. So what about us? We may not be Mary Magdalene, we may not be Marcus Rashford, we may not be Greta Thunberg. We don't necessarily have these big celebrities' status within ourselves. Sometimes we think we've got to be somebody in order to be noticed. I think what happens is that God can see into our hearts. He can see all those times when we try to do the right thing. We try to think of the other person. We try to be kind. We try to be forgiving. We try to be generous. And even then, in those times when we don't, he can still see into our hearts. And he never changes his love for us. He's always looking into our hearts, hoping that we can indeed listen to his voice and listen to the voice of love, and then try and find a way to get there, and he'll help us. So when Jesus looks into our hearts, he doesn't look into our hearts with judgment. He looks into our hearts in the same way as he did into Mary Magdalene when she was both in favour and not in favour. He looks into the heart of Marcus Rashford, both when he's on the TV screen, but also when he's trying to help quietly at a food bank. He looks into the heart of Greta Thunberg, and he looks into our hearts too, always with love and always wanting to see how we can grow and blossom and decide to love ourselves. This is what it means to look into the hearts of things. We're going to close in a moment with a song which I hope your teachers or your support staff will put up for you. It's by a gentleman called Brandon Heath. It's called Give Me Your Eyes. And this particular song has a wonderful way of using our sight to say, can we see the world through God's eyes? Can we see the world in a different way? Do we just get caught up with how the world sees things, which is very much on the surface, about popularity, whether it's on the playground or whether it's on the football field or on the world stage, on the TV screens or whatever? Or can we see beyond that? What about our friends? Do we just be friends with somebody because they're popular at the moment and other people are their friend? Or are we willing to try and see beyond that? Do we see just the beautiful people? Or do we try and see all people as beautiful and find the good in each and every person, because we believe God is trying to find the good within us? These are some of the lyrics. I need to stand a bit closer because my eyesight's not so good. Give me your eyes for just 1 second. Give me your eyes so I can see everything that I keep missing. Give me your love for humanity. Give me your arms for the broken-hearted, the ones that are far beyond my reach. Give me your heart for the ones forgotten. Give me your eyes so I can see. That would be my prayer for each of you today, and for our schools, for our support staff, and for our teachers. And may God see that within each of us as we try to live out this day. So have a good rest of the day. Thank you for listening, and may God be with you. Bye for now. Bye everybody. Take care.